Hi guys, welcome to my channel, Confessions of a Gaming Mum. Just wanted to do a quick thank you to all my friends who have actually subscribed already. Got blind faith in me that this is actually going to be a good channel. So yeah, thanks for that, really appreciated. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the content. I'll try my best to keep it as interesting as possible. Because obviously it's about my life, so yeah, it can't be that interesting. But we'll see. Yeah. So today's video is going to be about my birth story. Back when I was pregnant, I would scour YouTube looking for positive birth stories in order to get as broad an idea of what to expect about when I went into labour myself. So I'm hoping that me talking about my own birth experience can actually help others as well. Obviously, as I'm from the UK, my experience when it comes to medical treatment and midwifery might be very different. Well, it might even be very different from someone, because I live in obviously near London. Someone in the north might have a very different experience as well to what I have in terms of their treatment, and but obviously it will be very different because obviously we have the NHS over here. Yeah, I think in the US midwives aren't necessarily used when it comes to birthing. It's only if you have like a home birth or something that the US uses midwives. I might be wrong, but that's what I gathered from the birthing videos I did watch from the States. But yes, so obviously this is my personal experience. Every single birth is different, no matter if it's like two births from the same woman. Every birth is different. So so just because I had this experience doesn't mean anyone else is going to have the same experience. Doesn't mean if we go in for a second child that I'm going to have the exact same experience either. So keep that in mind. If you would be interested in seeing my pregnancy journey, I'll leave a link in the description for my Facebook group, or Facebook page I should say, where I actually charted, once we'd announced the pregnancy, I actually charted, or tried to chart week by week, the progress of my pregnancy and how it all went and the development of the fetus and everything like that. So if that's something you'd actually be interested in, because I go into quite a lot of detail, then you can click on that link in the description below. Anyways, I think it'd probably be good for me to start talking about my pregnancy a little bit, just to give you sort of like a brief intro into how things started. Anyways, yeah, to start the story, I did actually have a pretty easy pregnancy. I didn't actually find out I was pregnant until around 13 weeks, as I didn't really have any real symptoms that made me think I could be pregnant, so I never thought to check. I'd only been off the pill I think it was just not even 6 months, I don't think, and yet I never had a period in that time, because the pill I was on is something, I think it was called Cerazette or Cerazette, I don't know. I'll put a thing to say the name of it if I work out how to do text on videos. Yeah, it's called Cerazette, and it's a non-hormonal pill, because when I went on the regular hormonal pill, it was microgonin, I think the doctor first tried me on. It sent me a bit doolally, to be honest. Like, people would just say hello to me and I burst into tears. So and the shit that was going on at that time, like with the guy, and yeah, I ended up in counselling. It just wasn't a good time. So the doctor basically said, yeah, I don't think we should be screwing with your hormones, so we'll put you on the non-hormonal contraceptive pill. Like the regular hormonal pill, it's like 99% effective, but the non-hormonal pill is like 95% effective. So I was like, well, I think that's a risk I was willing to take, to be honest. So I was on a non-hormonal pill. Well, I was on Micronor first, and then I was changed over to Cerazette because they actually discontinued Micronor. I was on Cerazette for about not even 6 months. I think it was only like 3 months, 4 months, something like that. So once I finished that, I just came off the pill completely. When I spoke to the nurse at my GP, she said, make sure you have 3 consecutive periods before you actually try to get pregnant. Obviously that didn't happen, so sorry about that. Poor nurse. Although I went to see her afterwards and she didn't even mention it. But yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, because I never had a period, so I couldn't even tell by that something was different. The other symptoms I had were only slight, so I had like some slight nausea. Sensitive nipples was another one. And I think that was, and yeah, I was quite emotional as well a lot of the time, but because of the job I was in at that time, it was quite a stressful job. So a lot of it I thought was because of the stress. And also when I looked up the side effects for coming off Cerazette, it actually said that you should be careful not to think that you're pregnant, because a lot of the symptoms are pregnancy symptoms, because your body's trying to get back into its normal work, so to speak. So I kind of just shrugged it off. It was only when I was dieting, I was like, no, my belly's just getting bigger. I'm not losing any weight. I'm gaining weight. This isn't right. And I remember walking into the bathroom at work, and as you walk into the bathroom on your right was the mirror. And I remember walking in and looking at my profile, and I was like, wow, I really look pregnant. And I think it was the next day, because by then I'd actually handed in my notice at work. Long story, but I'm not going to go into it here. But I'd handed in my notice at work, and so I'd started to take on less and less work. And so with that, I was basically I can actually do stuff I want to do rather than just concentrating on work and getting in, doing work, and then going home. So I picked up a pregnancy test, did the pregnancy test, and that's when it came back as positive. So, and obviously at that point, I actually thought I was 7 to 8 weeks pregnant, but it was only when I'd left work and the next week after that me and my husband went to an early pregnancy scan, because it was driving us mad. We wanted to know how far gone we were, because obviously I couldn't tell through my periods. Stop choking on the bloody label. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so we booked an early pregnancy scan because it was just driving us mad, because where I didn't have a period to go by when the pregnancy had started. So we went along, and I was a bit worried at first, because when you sign in and they ask you how far gone you think you are, and I said I think I'm 7 to 8 weeks, and the woman was like, well, hopefully you're at least 8 to 9 weeks, because if you're less than that, then there might not actually be anything to see on the screen. Then I started really worrying, because obviously we paid quite a bit of money because we had to go private to get this scan. And I was thinking, oh great, if nothing comes up, then I've just wasted quite a lot of money, especially now I'm not working, to have this done. So I sat down, and obviously sat on the table and laid on the table, and the sonographer was started putting the thing on my tummy, and all of a sudden, instead of just this cluster of cells that we thought we'd see, we actually saw a hand, and then a head, and then legs, and a spine, and it was a fully formed baby. And I think all three of us in that room were just like, what the fuck? The sonographer looked at us and she was like, "You sure you're 7 to 8 weeks?" And I was like, well, clearly not. So yeah, that was a big shock for all of us. I think me and Jay both shed a tear, sort of thing, because there was real life on the screen. We had this real baby in my belly at that point. I get emotional thinking about it. It was such an intense moment. But yeah, so that's kind of how my pregnancy started, or how we found out about the pregnancy. The pregnancy had obviously started back in December, and I didn't find out till March. But anyway, yeah, that kind of paved the way for how the rest of the pregnancy was going to be, basically. Other than me having really bad hay fever in the summer, and you can't take antihistamine when you're pregnant, because they haven't got enough evidence to say that it doesn't actually cause any harm to the baby. But other than that, I had it really, really easy. I guess I could mention in the last 6 weeks, I think, because he was such a big baby. The growth scans, or when my midwife measured me, they have a really rough way of measuring from the top of the uterus, which is basically the line. I don't know if you can see where I am. It's the line here, so where your tummy ends, and then down to your pelvic bone, and that is basically how they roughly guess the size of the baby. And that is what I would go for every 3 weeks with the midwife. And then, but 1 week she did it, the size, it was coming up quite big, it weren't on the growth chart, it was actually quite spiking. And when it spikes, that normally means that there might be something wrong in terms of it might be gestational diabetes, which is quite a common issue, different things like that. So and obviously if it's a big baby, So yeah, there can be an issue when it comes to a big baby, because you might actually have to be induced and have a C-section, because they say that you might not be able to give birth to such a big baby normally. So because of this, the size that was coming up, they decided that I should have some growth scans. So when they were measuring the size of the baby, it wasn't, because he was so big and because he was so low down as well, his head was right in my pelvis. So it meant that when we went for the scans, they couldn't actually measure his head. So so they couldn't get an accurate reading to say how big he was. So we went for, I think it was 3 growth scans in the end, just because every time they were trying to make sure, but they just couldn't make sure. And in the end, they were just like, yeah, as I told them, like, naturally we have very big babies in my family, like first babies. So they were like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. So they just was like, yeah, sent me on my way. So I was like, fair enough, making me go through all that and stressing, thinking that I wouldn't get the birth that I wanted and stuff like that. You get a nice little segue into my actual birth story. So I thought what I would do is I would read my actual birth plan, and then that way I can actually go through it when I tell my birth story and actually say what happened, what, like, according to plan, what didn't happen. Although there should be a disclaimer there saying, when you create a birth plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. Most of the time, births don't go to plan. You're very lucky if they do go to plan. Hence why I was very reluctant to actually make a birth plan, because I knew that there probably would not be a point to it, because the birth would not turn out the way I would have planned it. So my main aim of the plan is that I wish to have a home birth with my partner and my mother present. I will be hiring a birthing pool for this, and so we'll hope to use it as much as possible. I also plan to breastfeed if possible, so any help that can be given once the baby arrives will be truly appreciated. And then basically I was advised to split this into different stages of labour. So they, like, it's basically reference for the midwife. Yeah, so I split it into stages. So I've got early labour, strong labour, delivery and postnatal, and that's basically the areas that the midwives would need a reference for, so they can go to it, because obviously you might not be in the right mind to actually say what you want. So that's why that's basically why they ask you to do this, and then they have a rough idea what to go with. So anyway, with early labour, so I said in early labour I would prefer to be home as much as possible, if I need to be even if I need to be transferred to hospital. In order to ease the discomfort of labour, I would like to be able to move around or lay on the sofa. If I need pain relief, I would wish to have paracetamol or gas and air if requested. I do not wish to be offered any pain relief. That's a really important thing to add. Well, I was told it was a really important thing to add when I went to hypnobirthing classes. And that's another thing I'll talk about. I'm going to do another video on hypnobirthing and my choice for a home birth as well. My partner can help with massages and words of encouragement, hand holding and supplying me with drinks, and in the early stage with videos and pictures. Strong labour. During the discomfort, I would like to be able to move around. I would not need privacy, as people talking will help distract me from the discomfort. However, if I request it, I would hope people would be happy to give me space. I would like to be able to use the pool as much as possible, as well as my birthing ball and leaning on the sofa, anything that keeps me upright. If I'm transferred to the hospital, I would like my laptop, tablet and my music player to be brought with me, anything that can keep me occupied. I have packed a hospital bag in case I need to be transferred, so my partner will be aware to bring it with him. And that's another video I think I'm going to do. I'm going to do what to pack in a hospital bag, because as I've said, my birth didn't go to plan, so I did need to be transferred to hospital. So you get to learn what you plan to pack in your hospital bag might not necessarily be enough for what you actually need when you're in hospital. So that's why I thought I'd do another video on that. I would like music or even a TV rather than quietness in the room, and if possible low lighting, or if it's during the day, then natural light. The pain relief I have considered is same as above, paracetamol or gas and air, and only upon request. I would like my partner as involved as possible with massages, hand holding, encouraging words and supplying drinks. Again, if he wishes to, he can take video and pictures. I would like to be updated as much as possible when my labour is being monitored, and that my examinations carried out are explained clearly beforehand. However, I would wish to be interrupted as little as possible unless the midwife deems it necessary. The delivery. I would like to deliver the baby upright on my knees or squatting in the birthing pool if possible. This is where I go to quite a bit of information. I probably should have said that before. I do not want to be laid on my back. I would not like the use of stirrups. However, if a different position is suggested, I would consider it but may not agree to it. And this is quite this is a thing I was quite sort of adamant about, because I'd read about the whole thing of obviously me being the history buff that I am, and like my degree in archaeology and everything. I always love like the history of stuff. And fun fact for you, if you didn't know this, giving birth on your back has only been around since, I think it's like the 1700s, not even that. And it actually came about because there was a French king who was a bit of a perv, and he liked to watch his children being born. So when a woman gave how a woman is supposed to give birth, which is standing upright, so gravity can help the baby be born, he was like, no, because I can't see the vagina. If if my wife is squatting, I need to be able to see everything. And he would get his courtiers in to watch the birth of his children as well, and just like this poor woman just laying there pushing out a baby with all these dusty old men in the room with her. So yeah, that's basically where laying on your back comes from, and it's actually not natural at all. It can make birthing a lot harder, a lot more difficult, and a lot more dangerous, because it makes a curve in the birthing canal, which shouldn't be there. Obviously it needs to be straight down, and like I said, and gravity helps as well. That's why you should give birth standing up as upright as possible, or give birth on all fours. That's another one, because as long as that birth canal is straight, that's the main thing of it. And when you're laying on your back, that's just not, it's not going to happen that way. So yeah, so that's why I was adamant not giving birth on my back unless I absolutely have to. I would like to prevent having a tear or cut as much as possible, but if it is necessary, then I will not be against it. I would like to feel the baby's head when it is close to being born, and if possible for my partner too, if he so wishes. I would like to be able to trust my body's own instincts when it comes to pushing, but if I am in need of help, I will not refuse it. I would like for the baby to be delivered on my tummy. I want to have an uninterrupted skin-on-skin contact with my baby. I would like to help hold the baby as it is being born if possible. If not for me, then my partner, again if possible and if he agrees. I would also like for my partner to tell me the sex of the baby. I do not need the baby cleaned before I hold them. If it is possible, I would like my partner to be able to cut the cord once the blood has stopped pumping through it. And it's where we go on to postnatal. And again, this might be a bit more too much information for you. The placenta. I would like to give birth to the placenta naturally. However, if the midwife feels that the placenta needs to be delivered quickly, then I am fine with the injection. This is another thing in terms of delayed physiological delivery, stage 4, I think they call it, or something. Basically, midwives think that it causes less damage to your insides, to your uterus, the lining of your uterus, if you give birth to the placenta naturally. If you have the injection, it makes things happen faster, and it can actually leave quite a big wound in your uterus, because obviously your placenta is attached to the lining of your uterus. I mean, that's why they say, like, it's a bit ridiculous sometimes that women have to go back to work less than 6 weeks after they've given birth, because they have this wound, and they say it's basically about the size of a dinner plate in your uterus. Like that's basically what the placenta leaves behind. It leaves this gaping wound in your uterus, and that needs to heal. And that's why obviously you have a lot of bleeding when after you've given birth, because of that wound. So they say that in order to make the damage as minimal as possible, that you give birth to the placenta naturally. You just wait for it to fall away, because obviously once the baby's born, the placenta's no longer needed, so it just falls away by itself. Sometimes that can take, I think they say it's like between 15 minutes to an hour. And if it takes longer than an hour, then that's when they say, oh, we'll give you an injection. The injection is basically just an extra boost of oxytocin. And that basically, and you could get the same thing normally if you start breastfeeding your baby. Once a baby's been born, skin to skin and breastfeeding, as soon as the baby's born, actually gives you a massive, or it's meant to give you a massive boost of oxytocin, which is what you use during labour anyway. So that will help the placenta to be born naturally. But again, like I said, if that doesn't work, then they give you an injection to help things along. I have no objections to being shown the cord or the placenta. I am not particularly fond of stitches, but if they are needed, I will not object to having them. And then they asked about my family. So I said I would like my partner or my mother to be able to take pictures and video throughout the labour and delivery, as I want as much of it to be recorded as possible. And then they also ask you in case of a cesarean. So I I said on my birth plan, if I need to have a cesarean, I would prefer an epidural rather than general anaesthetic. Obviously with an epidural, they just numb your spine so you can't feel it, rather than general anaesthetic where they completely knock you out so you're not actually conscious during the birth of your child, and that's something I'd never want unless I absolutely had to. If I require an epidural anaesthetic, I would want my partner present. I would like to have skin-on-skin contact with my baby in theatre. However, if it is not possible, then I would like my partner to have the skin-on-skin contact. So that's my birth plan. Reading it is kind of like, well, so much of that didn't happen. But anyway, yeah, so this will be me going through my birth story. Welcome to part 2 of the video. Had to stop the video after talking about my birth plan because one, I didn't want it to overrun on the video because our camera only records half-an-hour videos at a time, and also Mr. here started acting up, so I thought he'd want to be involved. Say hi, hello, hello. Yeah, so now I've talked about my birth plan, I can actually talk about the actual birth and how that went. I'll start by saying basically I went to 41 weeks pregnant. Obviously normal, well, the usual gestation is 40 weeks. So I started panicking about the fact that I wouldn't be able to have the birth that I wanted because I wanted a home birth, and you can only go up to 42 weeks before they have to induce you, or they suggest that you get induced, otherwise it's an increased risk on you and the baby. So I basically, when my midwife offered for me to have a sweep, was all for it. I was like, yeah, just get this baby out, this baby needs to come out. I don't want to be induced because I've just heard horror stories about inductions and stuff, so I want the baby out naturally. So yeah, it was on the Thursday that it was like 3 o'clock or something. I went to see the midwife and get a sweep, and basically it's not a very pleasant thing. So close your ears if you don't want to hear. And what I'm going to try and post a picture like here or like here or something of like a diagram showing what a sweep looks like basically, and not like anything graphic. I'm not going to be putting like pictures of women's like nunnies on here or whatever. It's just going to be like a scientific diagram. Yeah, so basically a sweep is when it's kind of like what they do when they check you when you're in labour anyway, to see how far dilated you are. And so basically they stick their hands up you and they check to feel your cervix, and because obviously they want to see if your cervix is in the stages of going into labour or like the process of eventually helping the baby to get through. And I remember the midwife telling me after she'd done it, so, and basically what they do, they when they put their hands up, they feel the cervix, but they also put 2 fingers. Disgusting. They put 2 fingers and they move them around above the cervix, so where the baby sat, and because he was sat quite low, so she could feel his head anyway. She like where the sac is, and they basically the sac is connected to the uterus via membranes. What they do is they detach, or they try and separate the membranes, so the sac and the uterus, they try and detach it all, and that is meant to help bring on labour. So once she did that, and it was super uncomfortable, not very nice at all, a lot of pressure. It weren't painful, it was just really uncomfortable because there's just a lot of pressure up there. And yeah, I sat down, or tried to sit down afterwards. that was quite difficult. And she said that I was 1 centimetre dilated, and I was not surprised, but I was also disappointed because I was hoping I'd be a little bit more dilated, because I'd been having a few like Braxton Hicks contractions over the last week or so, and I'd had a little bit of a show as well, where you like have a little bit of a mucus showing your knickers sort of thing. Again, I'm sorry if this is too much detail. Yeah, so I had a bit of a show and some Braxton Hicks contractions. You're grinding your teeth. Yeah, so I'd had yeah, she said I was 1 centimetre dilated, but my cervix was still, it wasn't pliable like it should be when you're about to go into labour. She said it was still quite hard, and I can't remember if it was, she said it was like inverse or something, but I think it's when it's still sort of when your cervix like points up, I think like that, so it goes up like that. It needs to be down like that, I think that's how she said it, but mine was still up like that, even though it had opened quite like 1 centimetre. So she basically said to me she didn't think I would be going into labour anytime soon. She was like, oh, I have a feeling you might be in for another sweep. Oh, please, I don't want to go for another one. That was horrible. And I was so uncomfortable for the rest of the day. You've pooed, haven't you? Okay, attempt 3, because we just had a massive poo explosion. Not me, personally, but the lovely little cherub that sat next to me. Yeah, you can mumble. So where was I? Oh yes, the sweep. So yeah, so the midwife basically told me that she didn't think I'd be having the baby anytime soon because of that sweep, so she thought I'd have to go in for another one, which I really didn't want because it was such an unpleasant experience. And for the rest of the day, basically, I could barely walk without feeling like all my insides were going to fall out. So yeah, it just wasn't a pleasant experience at all, but it was necessary because 6 o'clock on the Friday, I woke up and I felt, I got out, went to the toilet, went to get back into bed and felt like so 6 o'clock in the morning on the Friday, went to the toilet, went to get back into bed. Like Jay was, my husband was up already getting ready for work, but I went to climb back into bed and I felt as if I'd pulled something as I sort of lifted my leg up to get into bed because I was really struggling, like lifting my legs, like just climbing onto anything. At that point, like getting on the sofa was a struggle at that point. I was so big. But yeah, I felt like I'd pulled something, so that's what I thought it was. I thought, oh no, it's just probably from the sweep yesterday, it's nothing. But then like 5 minutes later, I felt it again. It was like a real pull. So I was like, oh, I wonder if these are contractions. And I think it got to 6:30, so it was just before my husband was about to leave for work. And I said, I asked him if it would be possible if he could work from home, because I have a feeling it might actually be like today that it might start. So he was like, yeah, it's fine. So he let his boss know. And then I think it got to 7:30, and I think it might have been a bit earlier, that I can't remember, but I know there was a lot of arguing between me and my husband in terms of like me saying I couldn't get in touch with the hospital because I was having a home birth. So yeah, so basically the idea with a home birth is that you have to, when the contractions start, because basically it's the same as with a regular birth in terms of you have to let the hospital know that you're having contractions or if your water's broke or whatever, and then they'll let you know if you can come in or not. But you can only come in if your contractions are regular. They don't want you sat there for like days if you're only having irregular contractions, because they might be Braxton Hicks. You don't know. So and it's kind of the same with a home birth, because they send 2 midwives out to your house. So they have to know that you are definitely in labour before they send anyone out to you. So my husband was arguing, you need to ring them now and let them know, and I was like, no, there's no point because my contractions aren't regular yet. And I'm pretty sure it got to like 7:30, and that's when I rung them, and like I said, my contractions are like, and we had a contraction app, like counter app on both our phones, and I said I think they were like 3 to 4 minutes apart and they were lasting about 30 seconds. And the midwife on the labour ward that I rung, and she said, oh, that's not regular enough, they need to be like, I think it was like 2 minutes or something and last about a minute. So I was like, oh, fair enough. So she said, ring me back in an hour and see how you are. So what we did was we then called my mum at that point, because obviously my mum was going to be my second birthing partner, and she was like, oh well, what I'll do is I'll come around at about 11 o'clock, but let me know if you need me before then, because obviously it's going to be a long day. She said, I'll pop to the shops and get some biscuits and make sure there's milk for tea. So typical mum. So yeah, so that was that. And then I think the contractions started getting quite intense. They weren't like really bad, but they got quite intense. So I rang my mum and I said, no, can you come around a bit sooner, because like Jay's or my husband's having issues like with the pool and stuff, getting the pool up and sorting out the living room, so I think he needs the help because he's stressing. So my mum was like, okay, fine, I'll be around about 9 o'clock. So my mum turned up at 9 o'clock. What's up? Yeah, so my mum turned up at about 9 o'clock, and I asked her, because by then the contractions had got to a point where I just couldn't speak through them. They weren't like really, really painful. It was just I wanted to be able to concentrate on my breathing. You just want attention, don't you? So my mum came round at 9 o'clock, and I asked her if she could phone the labour ward, because I was finding it really difficult to actually talk through my contractions. They weren't really painful, it was just I wanted to be able to concentrate on my breathing and just keep control of the situation and stuff. So I said to my mum, just in case I'm on the phone when a contraction happens, I'd rather you talk to them. So she rang them and they were like, no, we need to speak to the woman who's actually in labour, blah, blah, blah. So I did end up having to speak to them and talk to them while I was contracting, which was fun. So, but I mean, they understand, so they were patient while I was sort of breathing through my contractions while I was on the phone. But they said that they would send through the local midwife and she'd be there soon enough. And then they'd get through the second one when the second one was available, because obviously you have a main midwife that's with you and then the second one just as like an assistant sort of thing, just on standby. I don't really have the notes on this, so I can't really say what all the times were, but I know when the midwife came round, she asked to examine me. She was a young girl, really, really nice, really, really liked her. Louise, I think her name was, something like that. Yeah, so she came round and she examined me and she said that I think I was about 3 centimetres or something. I was 3 centimetres dilated. I think it must have been about 11 o'clock or something like that. What? Yeah, so I was about 3 centimetres, and she said, like, because Jay, my husband, had started putting the pool up, and she said basically there's no point in you going into the pool until you're 5 centimetres, which basically counts as active labour. You don't really want to go in the pool before then, because you won't benefit from the pain relief that it gives you if you get in too early. So I was like, oh, great, okay. But she was like, but at this point, the fact that you're doing really well with your contractions and handling them and how far dilated you are, she said it won't be long until you're able to get in. So she basically said to my husband, start filling the pool up. And obviously with a pool, it needs to be around body temperature. So it needs to be about 37 degrees. And you have a little thermometer that you put in to make sure the water's the right temperature. And then she actually said, I just got to pop out and do some stuff because I popped in on my way somewhere, so I just need to go and sort some stuff out. She said, you're handling this really well, so I don't think I really need to be sitting around when I could be doing stuff. But she said, but I'll come back, just give me a ring if you need me for anything and I'll be around straight away. But I'm only going to the I think she was going basically back to her office or whatever, and that was only 10 minutes away. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. So she popped away. And I think she must have been gone 2 hours or something by this time. Like my mum was helping Jay out with the pool. Yes, my mum was helping Jay out with the pool, and I was basically in our hallway, because there's a wall that has no pictures on it. It's just a plain wall, and it's nice and cold, nice sort of like plastered wall. It's nice and cold. So I had that behind me, so I could like just straight like lean my back against it, and it'd just be nice and cold on my back because I was getting a lot of pain in my back. And also right in front of me, because it's only a narrow hallway, there was the banisters from the stairs. So if the back wasn't helping, if the wall on my back wasn't helping, then I could hang on the banisters, and that really helped. Like arching my back really helped. And that it's so funny. It's like because I can remember little bits of it, and I can kind of remember the pain, but I don't really remember that much of it. I'm sure like my mum and like my husband can remember more of it than me. But at this point, like they say they thought I did really well, but I weren't really. I was breathing through it. I wasn't like crying or anything. I was just sort of taking it in my stride, so to speak. Eventually she turned back up. I was bouncing on my ball as well at this point. Why? Just why? Yes, so I think she was gone for at least 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. It went by really quick. She texted me in that time, but I didn't actually realise she had, because obviously I wasn't looking at my phone. I was a bit distracted by that point. You're right. But yeah, so when she turned up, she examined me again, and we're using my sofa as a makeshift examining table. And she checked, and I was 6 centimetres dilated by that point. So obviously I was definitely able to go in the pool then. So I changed into my little bikini top thing that I had, no bottoms on because no point if I was going to be pushing anytime soon. So I changed into my bikini and then got in the pool, and I can't tell you the relief getting in that water was so nice. It was like getting into a nice warm bath after like you've had a really long stressful day, like dealing with like commuters on your way home or something, or just like you've been to the gym so you're just really achy. It was that kind of just absolute relief, because and that's what they say about like water births, in terms of like it really helps to relieve the pressure, because obviously you takes away the gravity, you weigh a lot less in water, so obviously because I had a massive bump, the pressure of that didn't help the contractions, and taking it out of the putting it in water really helped to relieve the pressure. So I was so happy for that. Oh, I also forgot to mention, she I think when she first got to us in the morning, she asked me to wee into a cup so she could check my protein levels and stuff, and she said I was slightly dehydrated. So she was like basically saying you need to drink more and also try and eat. I felt like I couldn't eat though. I really wanted to eat. I weren't hungry, but I really wanted to eat, but things just kept getting like, I was not producing any saliva, so my mouth was so dry. So it was really difficult for me to eat and like to swallow anything. It was really horrible. So I just tried, we had Lucozade Sport. I was drinking loads of Lucozade Sport to keep my glucose levels up and also keep myself hydrated. Tried drinking water, but it just didn't do anything for me. Back to getting in the pool, and I think at that point it's when the second midwife turned up, and the second midwife was actually the one that gave me the sweep the day before. So she thought it was hilarious. She was like, I can't believe it actually worked. She was like, oh man, I'm really good. I've got skills. So we had a laugh about that while I was in the pool. Unfortunately, then it got to like 4 o'clock, 4:30, when there's a change in shift for midwives. So obviously they were on their morning shift, and then you have the midwives that then change at 4:30 to the evening shift. And the two midwives turned up that were taking over, and they were going through like my notes and stuff. And basically that's when they said about, well, that's how I know where I was at this stage, because at 4:30 I think they'd checked me. So yeah, so it got to 4:30, and that's when they changed the shifts, and that's when I got to find out like how far gone I was basically. They basically said, so at 4:30 I was 9.5 centimetres dilated. So basically if I felt like I needed to push, they told me to push basically. They said just, because obviously when you're doing a home birth, even though you have two midwives solely concentrating on you, they're very hands off, unless they have to obviously intervene. But the whole thing with having a home birth is that they are as hands off as possible. They won't tell me when to push. I just listen to my body, and I will push when my body tells me to. So basically that was when everything started getting quite exciting, and like the midwives were like, oh, you've done so well, got this far, you're doing really well, blah blah blah. And it was also at this point as well, because I can remember this quite vividly as well, where we did the hypnobirthing classes, like when I was still pregnant. I remember one of the midwives saying that when a woman's ready to start pushing, or when a baby's about to be born, when she starts mooing like a cow, and all in the class were like, ha 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 ha, yeah, that's really funny. But when I was at home, I just remember making this noise whenever a contraction came in, and I was just like Jay, apparently my husband can't remember it, but I can remember just being like every time a contraction came in. I think it was that point, it started getting like some serious shit started going down. But yeah, so we had these two midwives turn up, and unfortunately, I would love to be able to make my birth story as positive as possible, but unfortunately these two midwives didn't help the situation. So basically, I felt the contractions to start pushing. So then I tried to start pushing, just like going to poo, basically. And I could feel like my body was saying, you need to push, you need to get this baby out. And whenever I was pushing, I would get this such severe pain going all the way up my back and all around like the bottom of my belly. And it was so bad, like it would come on just so forcefully, excuse you, that it would take my breath away, so that I couldn't actually push anymore. And I think by then, I mean, I'd been quite calm up until that point, but then that's when I started to think something really must be wrong, because nothing's happening and I'm not able to push, even though I really want to. One of the midwives, She like, the other midwife wasn't so bad, but one of them, she was awful. One thing, every time I had a contraction, she would, as soon as, like, she'd basically be waiting, like hovering, when she knew I was having a contraction with the heart rate monitor. And as soon as, like, she could tell, like, a contraction had finished, or she thought a contraction had finished, she'd stick the heart rate monitor right underneath my belly and, like, really push. And the problem with the one that she had is it doesn't really work while underwater, so it would make this really horrible high-pitched screeching feedback noise, you know, when you put like a mic next to a speaker, and that would be right in my ear. And obviously I just had a really bad contraction, and that's what I was getting like her sticking at something in my stomach and that screeching in my ear. I mean, I understand why she did it, because obviously they need to check that with every contraction that the baby's heart rate is still fine. And luckily he was fine. She was checking my blood pressure every like 20 minutes or something like that. And my blood pressure was fine as well. So, and then that was the annoying thing, like my husband says, they were very much by the book, these midwives. You could look at me and you could see something went right. But because the baby's heart rate was fine and my blood pressure was fine, they were like, well, there's nothing to worry about. She's just being dramatic with these contractions because she's a first time mum and she doesn't know what she's doing. And also there was, because where I'd requested gas and air be brought to my house, so I could try it if I asked for it. Earlier in the day, one of the midwives had said, oh, did you want to try it? They said you might not need it just yet, or you might not feel like you need it just yet, but give it a go and see what you think. And I tried it and I didn't really like it. I was like, it's not really doing anything for me. So they're like, okay, that's fair enough. We'll put it away. So when the other midwives came, and they said, oh yeah, she's tried the gas and air, but she doesn't want it. She doesn't feel like it does anything for her. And this midwife was like, well, it's obviously because she's not using it properly. And then she, every so often, because I was making so much noise and obviously interrupting their conversations, because they were like, these two midwives had just sat on the sofa having a conversation. And yeah, because obviously I was making so much noise by this point, I was like crying and stuff like that. And she was like, look, just have some gas and air. And I was like, I don't want it because it doesn't do anything for me. And again, she was like, look, just take it because you're clearly not doing it properly. And it was just one of those, because obviously where you have the pipe in your mouth, it's quite a big pipe that you're sticking, like tube thing that you're sticking in your mouth. So you're having to breathe in and out through your mouth, and I hate doing that. If I'm in pain, I control my breathing through my nose. I've never liked breathing in and out through my mouth, unless obviously I've been on like a really long run or something. For me, I get the air that I need when I breathe in through my nose. So, and that's how I was able to control it. I didn't need the gas and air. But she was just really sort of pushing it on me. And my husband always says he laughs at the fact that I was just giving her this dirty look, like sucking on this thing and just being like, because she was just not letting it drop. And I think we still got the tube thing because obviously I just used it to bite into. I wasn't actually using it to breathe through. So yeah, that wasn't fun. Another thing, because I was having like regular, and they kept trying to get me out of the pool. This is what really pissed me off. They tried to get me out of the pool all the time to try and get me to go wee. And they were like, because that's another major thing about when you're in labour, you have to keep drinking because you have to keep weeing. They say it's one of these really annoying things, and they said people, like women, get so annoyed with the midwives for saying this, but they said, but you have to do it. And it's basically because you need to be constantly emptying your bladder, because if your bladder is so full, it can actually obstruct the birth canal, so the baby can't come through. And obviously you need to keep drinking because you need to be hydrated. If you're not hydrated, then you get exhausted and then you can't push the baby out. So it's like a constant cycle, really. And I hadn't been a wee since she'd asked, like the first midwife had asked me to go that morning. But I said to them, look, please just don't let me get out of the pool because I it's so painful. And if I'm going to go a wee, I'm going to go a wee in the pool. And I'll tell you when I've got a wee. And I kept saying to them, look, I'm trying to go, but just nothing's happening. And they were like, no, we're going to get you out of the pool. We're going to try and make you go. So I'd have to like climb over the walls of this birthing pool, be in absolute agony. I'd be holding on to my mum and my husband, trying to get me to go down the hallway, like literally just a little walk down the hallway, like 30-second walk, not even that. And it would take me about 5 minutes because I was in so much agony. And I'd be having I'm not even having contractions. It was just my bump was so heavy at this point and I was so exhausted. I just couldn't walk. And I couldn't sit down on the toilet, so I was like leaning over the toilet, trying to go to the toilet. My mum was helping me, bless her. I nearly pulled the sink off the wall because I was just like so frustrated by it all. And then like kept getting back in the pool. And again, the midwife pissed off my mum and my husband. And again, it pissed off me because obviously I wanted my husband to be there, like holding my hand while I was going through all this. But because the midwife was like checking my temperature every couple of minutes, and then she was like, right, the mother's temperature is at 36.8 degrees, therefore the water needs to be 36.8 degrees, which is absolutely bullshit. As long as the water is a reasonable temperature, as in like average body temperature, it's fine. The whole thing is that it's as long as it's not too cold or too hot, so you don't, one, burn the baby, or two, shock the baby so that they inhale a load of water when they're born. That's the whole point. It's just meant to be like an average temperature. The baby's not going to be like, oh, it's 0.1 of a degree less than it should be, I'm gonna like drown in this pool. So stupid. So yeah, so like my husband wasn't able to be, it could be with me like sometimes, but not as much as I wanted him to. I think he held the bucket for me a few times because I was sick, not that I actually brought anything up. But yeah, he was able to at least be there sometimes. Whenever they checked me as well, they said that my waters were bulging. My waters hadn't burst, because that's what they kept thinking. Because you're in water, they don't know if your waters have gone. So obviously that's why they also need to keep getting me out, because they needed to check my waters. But they said that it was literally bulging, and they didn't know how the waters hadn't gone because they were bulging so much. And so it got to 7 o'clock at night. So if you think I've been going from 6 o'clock in the morning, my contractions started, and at 7 o'clock at night, that's when they decided to burst my waters. And they laid me on the sofa, and yeah, they burst them, and they were like, yes, so just so you know, once your waters have gone, that's when the contractions will start to get more intense. So that was good to hear. So that weren't a very pleasant feeling as well. It was just feeling all this water just gushing out of you, and like feeling like you wet yourself, but you didn't actually feel the sensation to wee. It was really weird. But yes, they did that. Then I got back in the pool, and again the contractions were just absolutely awful. And I kept saying something was wrong, but they just weren't really. They were just like, oh yeah, new mum, you just don't know what you're going on about. Okay, let's try again, because the camera had stopped filming. That's always fun. Yeah. Yet they'd kind of just shrugged off my really bad contractions as me being a first-time mum and not knowing how to handle it, even though obviously I'd done so well. Like the earlier midwives had told me that I'd done so well in terms of keeping it all together and how far I'd come. So yeah, I think at this point, the positivity that I tried to have throughout the labour had pretty much all gone now, because these two women were just, they weren't very good. And yeah, if we are to go in for a second baby, I will definitely try again for a home birth, but I will specifically request not to have those two midwives there, because they were awful. And if anyone is registered with to give birth at Basildon Hospital, or registered through Basildon Hospital to have a home birth, if you want to message me, I can try and find out the names for you, so you know who not to have, because yeah, you don't want them at your home birth, you really don't. Yes, so it got to 11 o'clock when they said they'd check to see if I'd progressed, because obviously when they broke my waters at 7 o'clock, they then would have to check me again at 4 hours in 4 hours time to see if there was any progress, and obviously he hadn't moved at all. So, and that's why they were hoping that breaking my waters would actually help him to move down the birth canal, which it didn't. When they checked me at 11 o'clock, they were like, there's absolutely no progress. And then they started about the fact that they thought they'd seen meconium in my water, which is basically the baby's first poo. And when the baby poos, when they're still in the womb, they can actually breathe it in, because obviously with the amniotic fluid in when they're in the womb, that's they actually do breathe it in, and it's what they wee out and stuff. It's just what the fetus does when they like learn to breathe and stuff. So if they poo in and it gets into the amniotic fluid, then they breathe it in, it can lead to all manner of infections. So it's really important that they get the baby out before that actually happens, or to minimise the amount of damage it can cause. So the fact that they said that now, it's like, well, why didn't you say that earlier or whatever? But I think they just didn't have a clue what they were talking about. So yes, so they called the ambulance, and the ambulance took it like 10 minutes to turn up. It didn't take long at all, because we're not far from Basildon Hospital. And they managed to get me, because I had to get out the pool, then I had to get dressed, like dried off, get dressed, and then the poor ambulance man had to sort of walk me like slowly through the hallway out into the cold street in my dressing gown and my nightie, my slippers, get me into the ambulance when I was like crying because the contraction, like I was absolutely exhausted by this point. yeah, and then he had to strap me to the chair, and that was the worst thing, because the bump was so big, and obviously all the waters had gone. Literally, that was just all baby that was just sat in that bump now, and I could feel every part of him then, like in my stomach. It was the worst feeling, because whenever like they went over a bump or whenever they turned, if I moved onto my side, I could feel the baby rolling over as well, and it was just so painful. It was horrible. So I was like screaming in that ambulance all the way there. Then they rolled me through the maternity ward, and I can still. It's one of those things. Like, in the amount of times that I went to the maternity ward at Basildon and walked through, hardly saw anyone there. Like during the day, you thought it'd be like quite busy. Like thought I'd see like loads of people. No, hardly saw anyone. You just the most we saw was like a mum and dad leaving with their newborn. That was like the most that we ever saw. We see everyone. Everyone turns up on a Friday night at like 11 o'clock. So actually everyone was there. People that had just come to like check, like see their family or whatever, and see me just being rolled past like screaming in agony. And so yeah, that was interesting. And then they dropped me off in the labour ward. They dropped me off in a delivery room, and they got me onto a delivery bed. And then I think it took. I left the house. Again, I don't really know the times because it's not in my notes, or I haven't seen my notes to really know when things were happening. But obviously I must have got to the hospital just before midnight. And it must have taken them about half an hour, or it was between half an hour and an hour to sort out what was happening to me. And basically they got the head midwife who was on that night to examine me. By this point I was on the delivery bed and I was so warm that I just really did not give a shit anymore. So I just like threw off my my nightie. I didn't have any knickers on, so I was just completely naked on this bed. My mum was sat there, my husband was sat there, and all these people coming in and out the room, and I was just like squatting on this bed, just being like, oh, just get this baby out of me. So yes, I remember the head midwife like coming along and saying, "Oh, let's examine you." So I had to roll over onto my back again, and she said, "Right, when the next contraction comes, I want you to try and push." And at this point, even though I was just like, I really just can't do this anymore, and she was like, "No, I want you to push." So I really, really tried. I held my breath, chin into my chest, and just really, really went for it. And like she said, yeah, something's not right. She was like, the baby's head is like, I'm pushing and I'm using all my energy to push, and he's going down the birth canal like a certain amount, but then going back up again when the contraction stops. So they were like, so he's just not really doing anything, and the baby's getting tired and the mum's getting tired, so we need like so she was like, I'll need to get another opinion. So that was fun to hear. So and at this point the two midwives that really pissed me off like all evening, the worst one, she came along and she was being all like nice and thingy. She was like, oh, as soon as you're going into surgery, we need to make sure you take all this lovely nail varnish off. So she's like taking all the nail varnish off my toes and my fingers, and I'm just like, get the fuck away from me, you stupid bitch. But I was just like, if I say anything, I'm gonna end up punching her. So I just let her go on with it. And she's like, oh, look, your nails look lovely. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Fuck off. So then the surgeon who was in that night, I think she'd just been performing like an epidural or some, not an epidural, she'd just been performing a cesarean. So when she was available, she then came in and examined me, and again she got me to push. Again, while she's got her fingers up there checking to see what's going on, and again she agreed with the head midwife that basically that baby wasn't going to come out by himself. So I had to sign this piece of paper. She talked me through it, but I don't remember a word she said because I was just like, just hurry up and get this baby out of me, for God's sake. And basically, yeah, she just has to read through with me all the risks that are involved in, because basically what they'd said to me is that they were going to try and deliver the baby via forceps, which would require me to have an epidural because I need to be cut. I need to have an episiotomy. And if that didn't work, if they still weren't able to get hold of him, because he was still so far up, but if they couldn't get him out that way, then it would have to be an emergency C-section. So basically I had to sign to say that I agreed with all the risks that were involved with having an epidural and a C-section. And I think I was just and that was that was my signature. So yeah, once that was done, then they had to wait for the anaesthetist to come out because he was giving someone an epidural. So then you had that, and then so we had to wait for him. But once he was ready, then they wheeled me through to surgery. And again, I was just on this table, and it was like just the pain. Because I was by this point, I was just, there was no end to the pain. The pain was just there because of the weight of the bump and them getting me to lie on my back. So then it just, and when I had the contractions, obviously that just increased the intensity of the pain. But then they got me into surgery, and there was a lovely midwife there called Rosie. I absolutely loved her, and she held my hand because they got me to sit up. Because then obviously when you have an epidural, it's like an injection directly into your spine. So they have to make sure you don't move at all, because obviously you haven't something jabbed into your spine. So they got me to sit up, and then I had to try and crouch, like lean as far forward as I could over my bump. And like Rosie was like holding my hand and so, like being like just breathe and it will all be okay and stuff. So like they did this injection, and I just remember like pretty much instantly the pain just like melting away. It was the nicest feeling. But then they started to lay me down, and I realised like as the pain was melting away, so was like all feeling in my body. So I could not move my legs, I couldn't move my toes, I couldn't move like anything below my waist. It was like the weirdest feeling. I think the closest I've had to that was when I had an ingrown toenail removed. So my whole toe had been completely numbed. It's like the weirdest feeling. Or like when you lay on your arm and your arm goes dead, that kind of feeling. Really, really weird. So yeah, so they laid me down on the bed, and they started to put my legs up in the stirrups. And again, one of the things I put on my birth plan that I didn't want, but again, it's something that you have to have done when you're going through this. So yeah, and this lovely midwife Rosie was with me, like we were laughing and joking and stuff. And everyone, they were just like fascinated by my bump. They were like, bloody hell, is the baby standing up in there? It's so big. And the anaesthetist do the old joke of, oh, are you sure you're not expecting twins? I was like, ha, 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 ha. Yeah. But yeah, they were all really, really lovely. And like, because the pain had gone away, I was back to my normal self. I was laughing and joking with them. I was really relaxed, and they were all so lovely and like just talking me through everything. And it was really funny as well because the surgeon was a really little lady. And when I say little, she was really little. So they had me on the bed, and obviously they can lower and raise the bed considering where they need it. And yeah, just heard, all I could hear was the surgeon just being like, oh, you need to bring down the bed, like the bed lower. And you just heard someone go, that's as far as it will go. And she was like, someone will need to get me a box. I was just, what's going on? And my husband had been sent off, like, bless him, he wasn't allowed to come in the ambulance. He had to drive separately. My mum was with me in the ambulance because my husband had to pick up my hospital bag and lock up the house and everything. But he'd arrived, and they got him into his like scrubs and everything, got his little hairnet on and stuff, and then he was allowed into the surgery, like the surgery with me, and just sat next to me. And yeah, so he was listening, like he could hear everything that was being said, like from the surgeon and everything. And Rosie was sat with me, and basically like she had to feel, because obviously where the with the epidural, it completely numbed my stomach as well, my uterus, so I couldn't actually feel the contractions. So Rosie had to sit there, and she had to basically be constantly stroking my belly to actually feel like the muscles contracting, so they would know when I was having a contraction. So then they could tell me when I needed to push. And it's the weirdest feeling again, because you can't feel anything. So they're going push, and you feel like you're pushing. Well, basically, I was just putting my chin into my chest, because that's all I feel like I could do, because I couldn't feel the push. I couldn't feel like I was pushing, but they were like, oh no, you're doing really well. But all I could feel was like the surgeon just tugging, and like my husband said at one point, she literally had her foot on the end of the table just pulling with the forceps, like trying to get our poor baby out. But yeah, and I think it took 20 minutes of me pushing and her pulling, and eventually, yeah, like I don't even remember like feeling it all happen. I just remember like doing the push, and then looking, and then they'd like, I'm feeling this weight on my chest, because where they'd dumped the baby on my chest, and it was just like this big bloody mass, like just screaming, just like on my chest. No, it was just absolute shock, like just the fact that all that I'd been through that day had now like sort of culminated in this moment. And it was just such a shock. And then like I think they went to lift him away, and then they were like, oh no, Daddy needs to tell you if it's a boy or a girl, because obviously we'd waited for, like, we wanted it to be a surprise. But Rosie had her hand over the important appendage, so he was like, I can't see what it is. And she was like, oh yeah, sorry. So took her hands away, and then he like, basically my husband told me it was a boy. We'd had a little boy, and then they had to take him away and clean him up and stuff. And I was basically laid on the table. I still couldn't do anything, because then they told me they'd given me the injection for getting the placenta out, because obviously they couldn't have me wait on the table to get the placenta out, because he hadn't been born like as naturally, and I couldn't have skin to skin or anything. So and I do remember her pulling quite a lot as well, and I'm not aware of like what happened on the notes, but I know that the placenta took quite a bit of effort to take away. I think it had to come away piece by piece. So then they had to afterwards they told me to sort of look out for any clots or anything because I'd be bleeding. To make sure, because obviously they needed to make sure that all the placenta had actually been taken away. So obviously I didn't get that part of it either, because I wanted delayed clamping as well. But obviously they had to cut the cord themselves, so my husband didn't get to cut the cord either. But yeah, they took him away to be weighed and cleaned up and stuff, and so me and my husband were just sat there, or I was laying there, just being sort of like in awe of what we'd just been through and how it all went, and like just listening to his cry and everything. He had a proper loud cry, and weren't like a little whimper, like, it was a proper sort of scream. But as we found out later, bless him, I think he was in a lot of pain, because with the forceps, not only had they damaged the nerves in his mouth, so he getting really emotional about it. Not only had they damaged the nerves in his face, so he had this little gurn, like an Elvis Presley gurn. Not only had they damaged the nerves in his lip with it, he had a little cut on his face. I think they'd also really hurt his head and his neck, because the first few days, whenever you went to pick him up, he'd really scream in pain. So it really hurt him. I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. I've talked about this so many times already. But yeah, it also meant I couldn't hold him. They needed to do tests to make sure he was okay, because where the midwives had talked about the fact that there was possibly some meconium in my waters, so they wanted to make sure that he didn't have an infection or anything. But then they found out they think he had a bit of a raised temperature, but that probably was from the stress of what he'd just been through and the bloody labour. So they thought he might have an infection, so that's why we had to stay in hospital a number of days. But yeah, he was £9.7, so he was a very big baby. When my sister was born, she was £9.8. so yeah, like I said, we have big babies in this family. But yeah, basically I didn't actually find out until later. The reason I'd struggled so much with him was he was a back-to-back labour, which is basically when the obviously the baby, again, I'll see if I can post a picture somewhere to give you an idea. A normal birth is when the baby has its back to your belly button, so to speak. So it's facing, like the baby's facing your spine. That's how a baby's meant to be born. So then when they actually go through the birth canal, they're I think it's when they're looking up, so they're looking towards their feet. So I think it's this part of their head that is born first. So it's the smallest circumference, or it might be that part. I know it's the smallest circumference of the head that's born first, because obviously then it can fit through the birth canal. When you have a back-to-back baby, the only way, they can't get their head to face the right way, so when they're born, it's only the biggest circumference, so it's literally that part of the head. So it's as big as a circumference of the head that you can get, which is why it's really difficult, and a lot of people struggle with a back-to-back birth. And because he was such a big baby anyway, he had a really big head. So it just meant there's no way I would have been able to do it myself. So that made me feel a bit better. I didn't feel like I'd fouled him, sort of thing, trying to bring him into the world. But as you can tell, it didn't really go to plan. but then I wasn't expecting it to. I wasn't thinking it was gonna be all like sunshine and roses, and it was gonna like be everything I'd hoped it would be. And at the end of the day, he's here, he's happy, he's healthy. We're both here, happy and healthy. So at the end of the day, that's all that matters, and that's all that you can wish for, really. Like I said, I will definitely go for a home birth if we have another baby, but I will make sure I'm not having those 2 midwives again, because they just did not make the experience any good for me at all, I don't think. And I really don't think they helped, and I think my son could have been born a lot faster and a lot easier and a lot happier if they hadn't have left me for so long to have to go through all that, because I was beyond exhausted by the time I was put on that operating table. But yeah, he was born 1:03 a.m. on the 22nd of September 2018. Like I said, he had this little gurn because where his the nerves in his mouth had been damaged, and it meant he wasn't able to breastfeed for the first 2 to 3 days because he just couldn't latch properly. So when we had to feed him with a little cup, and my milk hadn't come in either, so we had to give him formula, which I still, it's one of those things I just really regret that I wasn't able to give him like my first milk, which is like meant to be like really sort of important for newborn babies, especially with him, because like they thought he had an infection, and it meant we had to stay in hospital longer. I mean, maybe if I'd given him that, I mean, that's the thing that goes through my mind, maybe if I'd been able to give him my first milk, then maybe we wouldn't have stayed in hospital for so long, because he would have got better. But I don't know. But yeah, he's here, he's happy, he's healthy. So I think that's it for my birth story. Like I do apologise if anyone's watching this going, that sounds really traumatic, what have I let myself in for? It honestly, I don't see it as negative. Like that period with those 2 midwives, to me they're the only negative aspect of my birth story. For me personally, I would go through all that again to have my son here. And I mean, yeah, it was a pain it was when I was going through it. It was kind of like, I don't think I ever want to go through this again. But everyone's different. Just because I had this experience doesn't mean anyone else is going to have this experience. Doesn't mean I'm going to have the same experience again when I go in, if I go in for my second. So it's just a matter of just being informed, and that's what I hope this, like telling my birth story, will actually do for other future mums, that they can sit there and be like, right, well, I know I can do this, or I have the right to do this, and stuff like that. I mean, if anyone does watch this and has any questions about their rights or how certain things went, or the procedure for anything, like about an episiotomy, because I originally was going to do a bit of a thing about an episiotomy, but I completely forgot. I'm not going to go into it because it's a bit graphic, when like how they cut you and stuff. So I won't go into that. But I might go into it in another video, because I can do one about my healing process and stuff. But yeah, so I will leave that there. Thank you all for sticking with me, because I think this is going to end up being quite a long video. It's going to take me freaking ages to edit, I think. But yeah, it's been good to get it all down on video, I think, because I think I wrote most of it down on my Facebook page, but I wasn't able to go into it, I don't think, as much as on here. So hopefully I've done the day justice, or the 2 days justice. Yeah, any comments, any questions that you have, just leave them below. Like I said, I'll leave links to my Facebook page and Instagram in the description, so you can join up to those if you want. But yeah, have a good one, guys, and I shall see you all in my next video. Bye.